My name's Sean MacLean. I'm here to talk about the oil sands development that's been happening here in Alberta and how that's been impacting development and development trends throughout the oil sands region. Today we're going to be looking primarily at the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, seeing what has happened there as a case study for this type of growth. So first, we're going to go over industry itself and work camps and how they're tied to one another and what the trends have been happening over the last 12 years or so. We're going over all the growth that's been happening in this region and how it's been being developed and how things have been panning out in the industry so far. And concluding with the land use challenges and how these things are impacting us today as professional planners. So the first work camp was constructed in the regional municipality in 1964 by Suncor at their Millennium Mine, which actually is still up and running and operational today. And as everyone here knows, oil sands extraction is the key economic driver for this province and really for the entire country as a whole. And with all the development that's been happening, work camps is the prime driver behind how this growth has been absorbed. While Wood Buffalo and Fort McMurray itself have been growing substantially and at unprecedented levels here in this country and really across North America, this has really been happening primarily within the work camp population, as you'll see later on in the presentation. So how much oil is in Alberta? The current estimates from the province have it at almost 172 billion barrels, which equates to about 13% of all global reserves. Which, to put in perspective, that's more than the US, Mexico, Libya, and Russia combined. And 98.5% of all that oil is in the oil sands region, inside of the three main deposits. So with all that oil and all that development, there's been a lot of investment from private industry and a lot of regulation from the various regulators. Over the past decade, from 2000 to 2010, $116 billion with a B has been invested in this one sector of our economy. And that's translated to, over those 10 years, over 1.6 million barrels of oil being produced every single day just from oil sands production. And that number continues to go higher and higher and higher as we're seeing more investment and more growth. So that translates to a huge chunk of the Alberta economy. In 2011, there was over 150,000 employees inside of Alberta alone that's directly related to the oil sands production. That's 1 in 14 people. So within this room itself, like if you were to look around, that's probably one of these tables would be directly related to oil and gas development within our region, which is a major contributor to our economy and to our growth in the future. And as you can see here, this is one of the trucks that you'll see on a lot of the different sites, and each of these trucks can transport a huge amount of oil every day, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There has been no stoppages within the oil sands and doesn't seem to have any coming up within the near future. So what are the challenges that the oil sands industry has been having? There's big challenges in terms of recruitment and retention. Everybody hears about, you go up to Fort McMurray, you work in the oil sands region, you work there for a couple of years, and you get out and you go back home. So industry has been having high levels of turnover within all sectors of its economy and all levels of its positions. So due to this, there's been a lot of elements that companies are trying to do to try and retain its workforce to try and grow its economies. So what are those strategies that they're looking at? They're trying to locate camps closer to project sites. They're trying to promote a fly-in, fly-out program, whereas you work up in the oil sands industry for 7 days a week, then you fly back home for 6, or maybe it's 14 on and 2 off, or each person has their own schedule depending on their job and responsibilities. So how is this translated? They're trying to get as many people to come up there and work long-term, so they're providing also additional amenities that's growing each camp in size day by day, year by year. So what are these amenities that people are providing? You'll see a lot of gyms within these work camps. These are the kind of the first types of amenities that have been really developed at these locations. So you'll get workout gyms, but you also get lounges. So you have places for ping pong, air hockey, pool, maybe a little seating area. But then things get a little bit bigger and start bringing convenience stores on site. So you can get your daily needs. You can get your, go and maybe buy a book, maybe buy a drink, have some time to yourself. Coffee shops. Tim Hortons is at a number of these camps. You can drive out for 3 hours through the middle of the bush and still get your double-double. So, and actually at one of the camps, they've actually instituted all-day breakfast, which is great if you're doing site visits, because you can go there at 3 o'clock and still get a breakfast sandwich. So it's actually quite popular with some of the work camp operators. They're providing running tracks, indoors, outdoors, of all different sizes, shapes. Basketball courts, again, indoors and outdoors, sometimes 1, sometimes 2. Sometimes some of the camps actually have leagues that play against each other. So you'll have one team from one camp going across the street and play against another one. Movie theaters. You'll see these starting to pop up on site as well. You'll see them maybe start off with a capacity of 10 people, then 20, then 50, and then bigger and bigger. You can see a trend where the footprint of each of these camps is getting larger and larger and larger. Hockey rinks. Building multiple hockey rinks at a site, indoor and outdoor as well. Living in a cold climate, living in Canada, people want to play their hockey. They want to watch their hockey. Some of them even want to root for the Leafs, but to each their own. And last but not least, there's at least one camp with a driving range, currently located in Wood Buffalo. I've been to that camp numerous times, and I have seen one person walk past the driving range once. Never has anybody actually used it, in my opinion, but it still exists. And you can see that each camp is providing different amenities, trying to get its own niche within the marketplace. Some will have all of these, some will have a couple of them, some will have 2 of each. It really depends on what the market is trying to bear and what the each individual camp operator is trying to push for its marketing agenda. So what is this growth turning out to be like? From just the 12 years from 2000 to 2012, Wood Buffalo in population grew 130%, which is unprecedented to anything across this entire country. And we're all hearing that Fort McMurray is taking a lot of growth. But over the same period, Fort McMurray, which is located in Wood Buffalo, took 78. And this is all from the municipal census from 2012. The rural hamlets, not including work camp population, grew 25%, almost 26. So how much are camps growing? How fast is this economy really growing? Well, over that same time period, camps grew over 565% in population. And this is actually a photograph of one of the camps in the region. It's a 3-story modular build. It's called Wapasu Creek Lodge. And there's actually numerous ones of these all across the entire region, not just within Wood Buffalo, but within other municipalities, other provinces, and this is a growing trend that we're seeing. This one's also the largest one in Wood Buffalo, of just over 9,000 persons been approved for this work camp. This is what the population distribution has been looking like over the last 12 years. So as you can see, in 2012, the work camp population, according to the municipal census, was just under 40,000 persons. Fort McMurray was just over, slightly over 76. And this is a trend that we're starting to see where the growth is being diverted away from urban centers, away from current established communities into more of these modular type buildings, which is very different than anything that our profession has really seen within modern memory. So this is just a basic trend line showing the growth pattern that's happening within the work camp industry. As you can see, it's going up every year and at increased rate. And Fort McMurray is going at more of a linear pattern. So this growth is going further and further and further towards work camp population growth. So this is just a graph here showing Fort McMurray against the work camp population. As I mentioned, it's about 2-to-1 in Fort McMurray, 2 work camps. But due to legislation currently under the provincial government, when a census is done, it's done in May or June of the year, which for Fort McMurray is actually low season for oil sands development and growth. So when you're actually looking at this, there's been a attempt to try and look at how many people can actually be located in these areas. Because of the geographic and topographic nature of wood buffalo, there's a lot of muskeg in the area. And for those that don't know what muskeg is, that's pretty much a lot of swampy land that's really undevelopable. But in the wintertime, when it dips below -40, -50, those swamps are actually frozen hard enough to develop buildings, build roads, and access remote areas that are further away from the current all-season roads. So during the summer, a camp of a capacity of 500 persons sometimes has 20 people living in it. But in the winter, when between the months of November to March, that's at full capacity. So there's a huge swing in terms of population. So when you're actually looking at the capacity of work camps, and you're looking at how many beds have been approved and built within the region, you're looking at a much different number. Wood buffalo is experiencing a lot of growth, but at this time, our current census numbers can't capture what that in total population is. So this is right now is the most accurate number that you have right now. 40,000 in low season and a potential of just over 90,000 in the winter months. So it's a very different dynamic than you would have in anywhere else, say southern Alberta or in other parts of this country. This is what that looks geographically. So as you can see here, Fort McMurray is right here in the center. And each of those black dots is the location of a work camp. Some of them are all season, some of them are just for the winter, some of them are exploration. Each one operates slightly different from one another. And these are the general geographic areas of where camps seem to be clustering around, where the camps are being invested in, where you see new camps being located, where you'll see expansions to existing ones. And really, you'll start to see these are kind of coming pretty close to urban centers. This one here is about a 20-minute drive from the edge of Fort McMurray. And these two down here go up right against the hamlet of Conklin, which is about 350 persons. And these are having such a large impact on how these communities grow, how they operate, and how we're starting to have to plan for these areas. So how big are these clusters of camps, and what's this looking like on the ground? Going from the smallest to the largest of these clusters, just west of Conklin, we have approximately 3,800 bed capacity. Just in the Anzac area, just over 7,500. 9,700 just on the east side of Conklin. In the CNRL Horizon mine, if anybody's familiar with that, that's coming to pretty much 12,000 persons. And just north of Fort McMurray, like the 20-minute drive I had mentioned, is over 14,000 persons. So what is this one here? This is where you'll see 3 mines are currently located. That's where you'll see the Curl Exxon Mobil mine, Husky Sunrise, and the Suncor Firebag mine. And that's got a population potential capacity of over 15,000 persons. So not everybody's good with numbers, myself included. So what is this? How does this translate? Well, if you compare these to your typical municipalities, typical settlements, this is kind of what it looks like. This is Canmore, same approximate population. Cold Lake is just outside of Fort McMurray. You have Hinton and Vulcan bookending Conklin, Westlock, and here, for those from the Calgary area, approximately the same size as Chestermere. For those people from the Edmonton area, it's about the same size as Stony Plain. So these are the types of populations that we're seeing develop at a much more fast rate and a much more different type of development than we've been seeing for the past 100 years, 200 years. It's a completely different model that's been coming up. So what are the land use challenges that we're seeing from this? Each of these kind of play with one another. There's a lot of ad hoc development. As I mentioned, to try and cut down on transportation time, camps are locating next to the mine site. Where's the mine site? It's wherever the deposit is. It's not necessarily where the best place to put a community is, where the best place to have residential. So that poses issues of safety. Proximity to industrial development is not necessarily good for human settlement, depending on how close, where it is, and how it's developed. There's environmental impacts of having ad hoc development sporadically throughout the region. If it's being located close to a mine site, how much land is that disturbing? How long of a road do you have to build to access that remote area? And congestion. Having all these camps located in various locations causes a lot of traffic congestion. If anybody's actually been up to Fort McMurray and driven during rush hour, it can be difficult. When you're driving off-peak hours to get across town, 10 minutes. When you're driving during rush hour and there's an accident on the bridge, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 45, maybe 3 hours. Maybe you have dinner downtown because you can't get out. It really is unpredictable. And then I mentioned again the fly in, fly out program that a lot of these companies are starting to promote. Flying people back to Edmonton, flying people back to Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, Newfoundland, the US on a weekly basis. How's that impacting how development is happening? So looking at environmental and congestion issues within the region, there's obviously fragmented land use. Being unable to anticipate where the next settlement's going to happen due to the fact that we're not doing the exploration. That's private industry. Industry's therefore dictating where residential development's happening, rather than being for where the best planning rationale is for locating that. It's wherever the resource is. With that, there's a lot of litter, attracting wildlife. We've all heard about the stories about wildlife entering into the oil sands region, bears coming into camp areas, having to put bears down, and how's that impacting it? Single road access. There's a camp right here, right on the border of Opportunity. It's about a 5-hour drive one way on a one road access point. How is that going to be accessed in the event of an emergency? And a lot of these roads here, as you can see on the map, are privately held. They're leases that have been issued by the province. So when the municipality wants to have upgrades, it's not a municipal road. How can the municipality dictate for off-site levies when it's not part of their own infrastructure? It's a privately held road. These are all major issues that are impacting how we're planning our region. Then safety. This map here shows a historical map of wildfires from the 1940s onwards. And you can see a lot of these camps are located where wildfires have happened in the past. And if there's a single point of access into these camps that's 2 hours one way, 5 hours one way, if that access is cut off, how are we evacuating people? Many industry representatives have said that, well, we have the fly in, fly out program, and we'll just fly them out on Boeings. But if this area here is 15,000 persons, and you have to evacuate in the event of a fire, how many planes is that taking off? And do you have those resources available? These are all things that are coming up and coming to the forefront and presenting challenges for not just the oil sands in this region, but in Peace River, in Cold Lake. How are those going to be dealing with how to develop regional plans, how to provide for infrastructure in a timely and orderly manner? So I mentioned the fly in, fly out program. This map here shows where those clusters of camp nodes are, and the stars are the locations of airports in the area. And they're all pretty much located pretty close to where these major population centers are. So when you're doing a fly-in, fly-out from Newfoundland, you land at, say, this airport here, you actually never make it into Fort McMurray. Their impression of Fort McMurray is camp and the mine site. They don't actually know what the actual community itself is like. It's about a 2-hour drive from here to Fort McMurray, but they never actually make it in. So how are we supposed to plan for municipal infrastructure when there is this ad hoc type of development where as soon as there's a deposit that's been identified and starting to be developed, that ends up maybe perhaps it's down in this region here, or maybe it's further north. How is the municipality supposed to make their 10, 20, 30-year, 50-year infrastructure plans about where to locate a wastewater treatment plant, and more importantly, how big to build it? So we're seeing that while you may anticipate a certain population, 5 years down the road, that population has doubled, or tripled, or increased exponentially. And so with this fly-in, fly-out program, you'll see residential, like I said, being developed differently. You don't get your single-family houses, your apartment buildings, your townhouses. You get this more modular type of development that's happening out in the rural areas that are very difficult to access, very difficult to enforce and determine if a new camp has been developed and it's been illegally constructed in this area here, how is the municipality supposed to know without doing drives out into the bush? The answer is drive out to the bush. So it's a real big challenge, and there's local and provincial economic impacts of this. So for instance, if I live in Nova Scotia and I work in, for let's say, one of the major oil sands companies, I work in camp, I work at this oil sands site, I get my paycheck of $80,000, $100,000 a year. All of my accommodations are paid for by the industry. So the person living there doesn't actually pay for that rental price or for their meals or for anything like that. It's all from the employer. So that $100,000, $80,000, whatever it is that they get paid, they fly back to Nova Scotia and spend it at their local grocery store, spend it on their mortgage in Halifax, in Toronto, in wherever it might be. And it's taking all those spin-off economies outside of Alberta, outside of the region. So it's having a much wider impact than just, we need camp operators, we need staff to work the industry to help grow Alberta's economy, but there's also a drag on it. So how do you balance those two elements? So looking at this, oil, like I mentioned, is the key economic driver, but how is that being developed? Where is that being developed? And how are we managing that growth? And as we can see, hypergrowth, like in the work camp context of over 550%, can lead to really fragmented and disorganized development. And this isn't just a wood buffalo issue. This isn't just an issue in terms of oil sands development in that specific region. We still have Peace River and Cold Lake, which are really on the cusp of developing. And the oil sands also goes into Saskatchewan and really opening up the Western Front for development. But how is that growth going to be managed? Will that growth be managed? Is it best to have the people living in camp? Is it best to have them living in the community? Are you going to grow a community of 300 people to 50,000 over a 10-year period? That's something that every single municipality and community will have to deal with in their own context, in their own way, and determine what are the pros and the cons of each of those. And looking at wood buffalo, how much growth are we anticipating in the future? If this has led us to over 500% growth over a 12-year period, how much are we looking at in the future? So looking at current development, this is what's currently operating in the region, in wood buffalo alone. This is including the developments that are currently out in those other deposits. This is just in the Athabasca area inside of wood buffalo's borders. And you're seeing already a 1.8 million barrels a day being extracted. The mines that are under construction are adding another 500,000 barrels. So this is what's produced the work camp force today, what's currently operating and what's under construction. Looking at what the provincial government bodies have approved, that's an additional 2.3 on top of where we are today. So while we are at 1.8 with an anticipated 500,000 additional, we're looking right now any day that could start development, start construction of another 2.3 million barrels every single day from this region. In application, we have 1.6 million barrels a day. So basically what's currently there today is also going through the stream as we speak right now. And what companies have announced, what their future plans are, which actually haven't even made into the regulatory stream yet, is 1.5. So if we're looking at this in the future, this is where we are today, and that's where we're going, of 8 million barrels a day. And today we're at 1.8 with another 500 coming down the stream. So this is the kind of growth that we really have to manage. And other municipalities, other provinces will see something similar to this. And as industries continues to grow and continues to develop, we're going to continue to see more work camps being developed, more fragmented land uses, more challenges to small communities that haven't been experiencing this in the past, and how our planner is going to be really managing that growth in the future.